My guest is Meredith Ward, the Deputy Executive Director of the National Association of State Chief Information Officers. Meredith, thank you so much for taking the time, and welcome back to the second annual GovRAMP Cyber Summit.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Great to be here with all our friends at GovRAMP.
Last year when we spoke, there was a couple hot topics we went through, and kind of the idea of how NASCIO was kind of working with then State Ramp, now GovRAMP. I want to jump into some hot topics that maybe are bigger than just cybersecurity. There's a new rule coming from the Justice Department that's going to really impact state and local organizations. Talk a little bit about this IT accessibility rule. Folks aren't familiar with it. What is it, and why does it matter?
Sure. So last year, the U.S. Department of Justice issued a final rule on the American with Disabilities Act that governs website accessibility and app accessibility. So the law has been in place for a very long time, but there hasn't been a lot of teeth to enforcement. So what this does is mandates that any public website or app has to be accessible, and there's a whole list of what that means, and folks can look that up. So for most states, the deadline is this coming April in about 6 or so months. And then for smaller localities, the deadline is a year from there. The only thing that I will say that's interesting about that, when you think about disabilities, we think we know what that means, but that's someone like myself who I can't see distance, and I need stuff to be blown up in order to read that. So it's really all-inclusive, and up to 30% or more of Americans need some sort of accessibility service.
So for years, the federal organizations have focused on ADA requirements for websites. They've had some challenges for sure. There's been a Section 508 report for many years. How's NASCIO playing a role to help states get ready? This is not an easy fix for a lot of websites because there's legacy technology, old infrastructure that maybe don't support accessibility requirements today like they should have.
No, absolutely. And I will say that some states, if you think about state websites or state web pages, there are millions of them, right? And so for a state's, let's say, main website or main portal, most states have been doing this for years. But when you get down into agency websites and apps that were perhaps developed 10 years ago, there's a little bit more lag time. So it does take time. And it takes some expertise. There are some really great state IT accessibility coordinators in states, and about a little over half of states have those. One of the issues is they don't have funding to support IT accessibility initiatives. So, our group of state IT accessibility coordinators are, sometimes we like to call them scrappy. They can do a lot with not a lot. So, NASCIO has been convening these folks over the last year, but they've been an established community way before NASCIO kind of stepped in.
I think bringing them together can also help those states that don't have those coordinators, or it's, well, I am also the this and the that, and I wear multiple hats, and I dip in and dip out when I can. You have resource pages, you have templates. What kind of services is NASCIO providing generally?
So great question. Our senior policy analyst, Kalia Young-Gibson, has done a lot of guidance papers. We have a state members only working group that has been convened since January. And that's really a technical working group. They have worked through issues that perhaps is not the same sit and get with a guest speaker that a lot of times we do. We're also having in December a summit just for those folks to get together to talk about what they're doing, because not only are those people helping their states, a lot are also working with local governments to help them get through the requirements.
On the other side of the coin is the Justice Department and the federal government, assuming we get through the shutdown and all the challenges that they have with funding. Are they also providing some help or some resources that you're able to kind of be the conduit between the state and local and the federal government?
Absolutely. They've provided a ton of resources even before this year. They've provided step-by-step guides because it is a technical issue. The U.S. Access Board, folks like the Viscardi Center, there are a ton of resources out there. The implementation and the funding seems to be a little bit of the lag in the public sector.
I think funding is always a challenge, especially when it comes to things like cybersecurity, like when it comes to things like accessibility. Everyone understands why it's important, but when you have a finite pool of money and you have a lot of priorities that pull in at it, something usually has got to go. Is that one of the messages you're trying to reinforce to the state and local executives to say, hey, we know that it can be tough, but it doesn't take a lot of funding and it doesn't take a lot to make a big difference for a lot of people?
So it's interesting that you asked that. So before this rule came out, NASCIO's message really was, yes, it's the right thing to do, but when you think about how many Americans are affected or have some sort of disability, we know disabilities that are disclosed. We don't know disabilities that are undisclosed. And this is, again, like I said, folks in my generation, other people that you might not, people who are colorblind. So when we think of the ADA, we automatically think of, maybe folks who are blind or who are deaf or things like that. But really, when you peel back that onion, there's a lot of different facets of it. So, our message for many years has been have an IT accessibility coordinator, do that work. Yes, put some funding behind it, but we also need executive level support. Because now, again, beyond just the right thing to do, there's some DOJ teeth to it.
Right. Yeah. Funding also plays a role in cybersecurity. Sure. There's maybe some concern about how the grant program from CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, and the Homeland Security Department is helping agencies at the state level prepare and deal with cyber threats. That's another area that you guys are focused on as well.
Sure. So for those of you who don't know, we're recording this on October 1st. It's the first day of the U.S. federal government shutdown. So as far as the grant is concerned, it's amazing that we're already at reauthorization. So, a little bit about the state and local cybersecurity grant. It was established in 2021, and it is 80% of that grant funding goes to local governments. So it's been extremely beneficial. A lot of states have set up some sort of shared services, whereas states purchase, let's say, cyber training, and then local governments for free can use that cyber training. So, with only 20% of that funding going to states, it hasn't benefited states as much, and that's okay because local governments are the ones who really need it. Wow. So there is draft language right now to reauthorize. The tricky part right now is the state match on that is pretty high, higher than we've ever seen for another grant. So that kind of, the outcome of that remains to be decided. There's also a CISA reauthorization bill that is up right now. So we are very hopeful that those will get passed, again, especially to help our local governments who need it. I know if states need it, local governments absolutely do.
I know it's easy to ring the alarm bells, but if that funding would go away, what's that downward effect on the state and local governments and their ability to protect systems and data?
So I don't want to be an alarmist and say, everyone's going to get cyber attacked and it's going to be mayhem. I don't want to do that. But because we know that everyone is a target every single day. What the grant has really helped with is, number one, state and local collaboration. So, because if you think about it, the bad guys, the bad gals in cyber, they don't say, okay, I'm just going to attack this one locality and I'm going to pay attention to borderlines. They don't care, right? So cyber is everyone's responsibility. So it's really helped coordination. It's helped get basic things like I mentioned, training, phishing, simulation, things like that perhaps local governments couldn't afford before now. And it's been absolutely critical. So, if that goes away, we all hope that there could be funding somewhere to sustain it. But, I know a lot of states, a lot of localities are facing budget shortfalls now. So it's very uncertain.
NASCIO is not a lobbyist organization, but I'm sure you've had conversations with folks on Capitol Hill, you have folks at CISA. What is the message that you're trying to send to them in a way that's not, again, to your point, ringing the alarm bells that the whole world's going to fall apart, but to understand the why this is so important and they should reauthorize it?
Yeah, the folks at CISA absolutely understand. And, you're right, we educate. That is kind of our role on Capitol Hill. We provide data, best practices that we see, and that's really our role. So our message is, again, what I just said, cyber is not a directly targeted at just one entity. It affects states, it affects the federal government, and we need guidance because no state, no locality can fight all of these things alone.
And I think that's where the idea of GovRAMP also comes in,
Sure.
this idea of giving folks a pathway to marketplace, a pathway to find qualified organizations, companies that can provide with these services. But again, you can have the best companies in the world, but if you can't have a budget or your budget's limited, that also impacts your ability to protect systems and data. So let's hope Congress gets this through, and you guys.
By the time this comes out, let's hope we have a different outcome.
Exactly. Speaking of outcomes, you have a new survey. Chief Data Officers. This is I think the first one NASIO has ever done.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the results from that survey?
So we released this yesterday, I believe. And it's the first ever one. So we had 27 state chief data officers respond. We came up with this idea earlier this year. We asked the Beck Center at Georgetown University, who runs the state CDO network, if they wanted to partner with us, and they did. And so the survey is somewhat short and sweet. It's not as involved as our cyber or our CIO studies, but a couple of highlights. Number one, CDOs now mostly report to the CIO office. In my time at NASIO, I can tell you that has changed a little bit. And their roles are established in statute and executive order, CIO directive, things like that. Some of the great parts of the study that I encourage everyone to check out on our website, it talks about the day in the life of a CDO. They've told us, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? And what's your advice for a new CDO? And there's some really great, I always love those open-ended questions, those good nuggets.
The Chief Data Officer role has really emerged over the last, let's say, 7-10 years. Do you see some similarities between CDOs within the state organizations? If you're the CDO for Minnesota, is your role similar to the CDO of Utah, or there's not been that kind of standardization quite yet? The federal world is more of a standardization.
Well, so you know what I'm going to say. If you've seen one state, you've seen one state, right? But sure, there are a lot of common themes with what they're charged with doing. They work very closely with the state CISOs, the state chief privacy officers, and obviously the CIOs. A decent amount of them are attorneys, but some are not. They come from very differing backgrounds. So it's an interesting read. I know that I'm biased, but the survey, I think, has some interesting data.
We will make sure we link to it on federalnewsnetwork.com, make it easy for people to find. Let me broaden it out because from a NASIO perspective, you have the National Association of State CIOs. How are you working with CDOs? Where do they fall within your organization in terms of the resources you provide, beyond the survey, of course, and how do you help them kind of become more successful?
So, and as I said, we partnered with the Beck Center, the state CDO network, and that's been in place, I want to say, for 5 or so years. I, of course, have lost time over the pandemic. So they have been organized for a while, but as we have seen, where more and more report to the state CIO, our CIOs have said, we want to bring them in to NASIO. So we held our first ever state CDO summit this last summer. We have done this publication, and we have a session at our upcoming conference that talks about the study and kind of a day in the life. So the way that NASIO works is if our CIOs say this is something that we need, what we want, that's when we really say, okay, we're gonna kind of step in and provide more offerings. But again, the Beck Center at Georgetown has done a great job. We certainly are not trying to replicate, what they've done, but just respond to our member needs.
When we talk about priorities at NASIO, let's hit upon a couple others.
Sure.
You mentioned IT accessibility, you mentioned the cyber funding, two big things that are happening, but in short term. over the long term, where do you see some other focus areas for NASCIO? And I know the two letters AI will probably get mentioned, but I'll open it pretty wide, let you walk through the door.
Well, let's go ahead and tackle that elephant in the room.
The big elephant.
Right, the big AI elephant. So a couple of things that I'm sure folks are watching this, they know this, but I hear so many of my friends say, well, AI is this new thing. It's not, FYI. We call it traditional AI or good old-fashioned regular AI. But of course, generative AI in the last couple years has really blasted onto the scene. Now we're looking at agentic AI. And really, I think, what is next? This has all developed fairly quickly, which is pretty exciting. I think that this is one of those things that, our grandkids or my nieces and nephews are going to ask me, tell me about when, this kind of AI revolution happened. So states are certainly using Gen AI. They're dabbling in agentic AI. We're seeing some states use that in the procurement process, which is really nice. But mostly states have policies, guardrails in place, things like that. So as far as other priorities, an interesting one that I'll talk about is service delivery. So, state CIO offices operate in a shared services model. And basically what that means is most state CIO offices don't just get an appropriation and a budget from the state legislature. That's something that we spend a lot of time educating on. They bill agencies, other state agencies are their customers. So what we're seeing, all CIOs provide services to the executive branch. We're seeing a little bit of an increase in other branches, from the AG's office to Secretary of State to state police, if that's broken out in a state. And so where that, wasn't as high years and years ago. So that's something to be on the lookout for. And in most states, CIOs can require only executive branch agencies to take their services. But again, if you've seen one state, we've seen one state.
On the AI,
Sure.
We're definitely in the hype cycle of agentic. All the vendors want to talk about it. Nobody's quite sure what it means, how to use it.
Sure.
But all the vendors are saying it's going to be here tomorrow, so let's use it today.
Right.
What is NASCIO doing to help educate state CIOs and their staffs about what is a smart use case? How does it work? I know at the federal level, they collected a bunch of use cases. Have you guys thought about doing something similar? Have you guys started to put, some training? What is your role?
So with agentic AI, there's a couple of sandbox environments, if you will. None that states are really, really ready to talk about publicly, and that's good, right? Government doesn't need to be the first to fail. That's the private sector's job. We need to be a little bit more cautious. But something that you said brought up something in my head, whereas vendors or private sector partners, everyone's saying, we have AI, we do AI. And so we really need to be careful about, what does that mean? How are you using it? Do you know how that works? And I've heard folks say, well, we don't allow Gen AI in our office. And it's like, okay, well, people are using it. Do you use Teams? Do you use Zoom? You have Gen AI, even if you don't know that you have it. So, NASCIO's role there is really to say, here are some things to watch out for. Here are some best practices. And then have a conversation about what could happen next. If I had a magic 8-ball, how could I predict?
There'll be another AI name and more hype cycle. That's all you need to know.
Absolutely.
In the last minute we have together, let me go back to the shared services model, because I think that's also interesting. We're starting to see a push within the federal sector for consolidation. Is there a lesson? Is there something you point to that you've seen about, from a state CIO's perspective, about how they are applying and using shared services that maybe the federal organizations could maybe look at, learn from?
So, again, as the name suggests, the federal government is very federated, and what that means is agencies have a lot more autonomy. And in states like Texas, for example, they're a very federated environment, and it works very well for them. So what we've seen over the last several years is a move to more consolidated, centralized environment. Number one, states have seen a cost benefit from that. You might go from, 30 email systems down to 2, something like that. That's something very simple. And so in some states it's been, a slow go. Some are working on it right now. Kansas is one, Montana is another, that y'all can check out. But if you look at a state like Oklahoma, they have had demonstrated savings from that. But it's really about winning over the hearts and minds of agencies. Because, an agency might say, I am unique, special, and different, and this is why I don't want to be consolidated. And that really takes some emotional intelligence. So, I don't know with the feds, if they could be successful, if they put their mind to it, they definitely can, but it's a different model.
With the feds, it tends to be, they try to eat that apple in one bite.
Sure.
Like, let's consolidate all payroll providers.
Right.
What I've seen it work is the Labor Department example. We're going to consolidate within the Labor Department.
Right.
And then we'll take that success and see where it takes us.
Sure.
So it's good to hear there's obviously ongoing. Kansas, Montana, Oklahoma are good examples, and more to come on that.
Sure.
Meredith, we're out of time here at the GovRAMP Cyber Summit, so let me thank my guest. Meredith Ward is the Deputy Executive Director of the National Association of State CIOs. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason.